Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Coffee and Open Source, a place to meet some new friends, have some great conversation, and maybe learn something along the way. I'm your host, Isaac Levin. And if you're enjoying the conversations here, be sure to like, subscribe, follow wherever you're watching or listening. Also, if you or somebody you know would like to come on and have a conversation with me, feel free to reach out to me on Blue Sky. My handle there is at isaac11.com. You can also reach me on Twitter. My handle there is IsaacR11, or you can reach me on Mastodon. My handle there is IsaacR11 at fossil.org. All right, so with that out of the way, I'm looking forward to this. Like we were talking before, that I think I've interviewed more people on their team than anybody anywhere else because they're all just so nice. And I'm looking forward to having a conversation with him and learning a bit more about why he's nice. So my guest today is Jeramiah Dooley. Jeremiah, do you want to say hello, introduce yourself?
Hey, Isaac, it's great to be here. Yeah, my name's Jeremiah Dooley. I run one of the advocacy teams over at GitHub, and this has definitely been one of those talks that's been on the calendar for a little while that I've been super excited about. So definitely happy to be here.
Well, hopefully I'll follow through on your excitement. I think that sometimes it's always like, oh, like I'm very excited to do this, but then at the end of it, like I tell people when they before we get started, like my goal is for at the end of it for you to be like, oh, that was quick, because it means you weren't miserable, right? And one of the ways I love kicking off conversations is having, a little bit of understanding is where it all got started for you. Like I think we're
Sure.
all like in the tech space, we all kind of like a little bit of a superhero fetish. So like what do you remember what your origin story was? Like when technology introduced itself to you and when you realized it was the thing?
Yeah. So I am of an age where I did not grow up with a computer in the house.
Mm.
So, and I think that matters because I got my first computer, which was a Tandy 1000 SL, when I was in sixth grade. So when I was 12 years old, and it blew my mind. And it was always just kind of a tool to be used for something. It was never really the center of something,
Sure.
right? Like, it wasn't, I feel like today technology has become an indispensable thing. And at that point, it was not indispensable. In fact, it was something not everybody had. And so being able to use it as something to add to your life instead of something to build your life around, I think was really kind of helpful in that. So I also had the good fortune of being one of the first classes at my college where the state of Virginia, the Commonwealth, I apologize to all the Virginians out there, the Commonwealth of Virginia paid to put high-speed internet in all of the dorm rooms in the college that I went to my sophomore year of college. And the entire side of what do we do now that we have this connectivity was really kind of that aha moment for me. Um, it started with all of the, oh, we get to go build our own stuff. Oh, we get to, create our own websites. Oh, we get to do all this fun stuff. It quickly moved into people are bringing computers to school that don't have the ability to get connected to the internet. So me and one of my hallmates, who ironically his mom was one of the Microsoft developers who built Windows NT 351. So he actually had like shop burn
Oh,
CDs of
cool.
NT 351 stuff in his dorm room. We put together like a side hustle, just installing network cards, just putting NICs in PCs because nobody had one of those. Everybody had a modem, but nobody knew what to do with this Ethernet thing that was being handed to
Ethernet
them
thing.
when they got to their dorm room. So uh, the technology, I started college as an English and vocal performance major and kind of switched to IT halfway through, and then after I left school, then it just became, how can I say yes to everything everyone asks me if I can do? Like when people ask me, what was your strategy for getting a job? It was just to say yes,
Interesting.
right?
Interesting.
When someone asks, can you build a Novell network for a local municipality? Of course I can do
Sure.
that.
Why
And
not? Why not?
Barnes and Noble's right there, and I'll
Yeah.
go find a book and I'll figure out how to do it. Can you Can you build networks for hospital chains? I worked for a cardiac specialty hospital group around the U.S. and they were like they needed a network engineer. Of course I can do that. Of course I know how to use that piece of technology that you're talking about. Like, yes, of course I can. I can be confident in it now and then actually go learn it so that I can
Yeah.
be competent in it later. So it just, my career was essentially one step after the other of someone saying, "Hey, there's this cool thing. Do you know how to do that?"
Hmm.
And me continuing to say, "Of course, absolutely, I know how to do that. I'm glad you asked me." And then figuring out how to be good at it.
I mean, that's pretty Like, I mean, that's fascinating. I think one of the things that I took from that is that, and if this is incorrect, please correct me. You have a little bit of probably painful curiosity, like you're always looking to play around with new things, but also you kind of like making people happy. Is that kind of a little bit of
Yeah, and
yeah?
I didn't like being poor. I mean,
Sure. Yeah.
I
Yeah. Yeah.
grew up dirt poor. I'm the oldest of six kids. My dad spent his entire career in the Department of Defense and the Army. We moved around the world. When I started seeing these jobs, I love learning things
Yeah.
and being in an environment where there was genuinely always something new to learn was attractive. But the other part of it was like it was a means to an end,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I always wanted a big family. I always wanted to make sure that, my kids weren't born in the same kind of hole
Sure.
that I was
Sure.
born into. And so there's always been a facet of tech for me that is like this career. We do things because we love the tech, but at the end of the day, like that's my job,
Yeah.
right? My family, the people I'm taking care of, right? The two kids that are about to leave and go to college, like those things end up being the reason over time that you really start to focus in on what am I going to do and how am I going to do it, and what is that job going to look like with travel and those sorts of things. So, yes, I like being able to say yes to people. Yes, as the oldest brother of six kids, I am a nonstop fixer.
Yeah.
I want to fix problems. I want to help people. I want to make things right. I want to have people happy.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, what I learned was that this is a job that or a field that I had an aptitude for,
Mm.
and that was willing to continue to advance me, provided I was willing to put in the time to learn not just what needed to be done, but why it needed to be done and be able to communicate that to people along the way.
Yeah, I mean, like the paternal instinct thing is pretty fascinating to me because I think that, once you recognize that you kind of have that, because I think that is something that you tangentially have or you don't have, right?
Sure.
Like when you realize, like, it's not that I need to take care of people, right?
Yeah.
You then fall into certain,
I
like,
enjoy it.
yeah,
I enjoy
exactly,
it. Like it's not
exactly.
even a need. Like
Mm,
I feel it's part of why, and we'll talk about this as we go through my move from an individual contributor to a manager
yeah.
was because it gave me the ability to take care of more people. Right. Like
Yeah.
that's what I do. I love doing it. Like everybody, um, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, you get your batteries charged in different ways.
Sure. Yeah.
My batteries have always been charged by taking care of the things and people around me that needed to be taken care of.
Yeah.
So the particularly as my tech focus moved from more of the like hands-on tech to the helping people figure out how to take advantage of the tech to now helping developers, very in a very focused way, helping developers be better at their jobs.
Yeah.
It's really, uh, I feel lucky that every step along the way of my career, it's been able to help me focus on kind of the personal brain stuff that fulfills me the
Yeah.
most, being able to take care of my family, but also being able to take care of people who are in different stages of their careers, people who are in places where maybe they didn't get some of the luck or some
Yeah.
of the fortune that I got along the way, being able to pay that forward, being able to pass that on has been an absolute joy. Like it's by far the part of this. I like the people way more than I like the tech at this point,
Interesting.
but the tech is what allows me to help people.
Yeah, I think that I mean, there's a lot of things that you said that I want to drill into. I've written them down so we don't forget, but I
Sure.
need to go a little bit back, right? So, like you were talking about when you were in school, you were in English and vocal arts.
Vocal performance
So,
major.
like,
Yeah.
I need to know more here. I need so like you're not gonna toss that into the ether and let it go away. Like, I want to know. Um, one, there's two parts to the question.
Okay.
Like, what things do you recognize now that are critical to how you are as an individual because of the things you did or learned in that area? Because I think it's fair to say that fine arts and then going into technology are somewhat different career paths. I do think there's lots of similarities between the two of them, but it is
Sure.
different career paths. And then the second question, which I think is the more fun one, like, was it singing? Was it dramatic arts? Like, what was the vocal performance piece of it?
So my family is stupidly musical.
Mm,
And when I say that, everybody everybody has everybody kind of puts their family on a pedestal for different things.
sure.
But like legitimately, my family is absurd. My dad was the lead singer in a country rock band when
Okay.
he was stationed in Germany. So literally, I grew up watching, 10,000 drunk GIs scream Freebird at my dad.
Goodness. Okay.
And he's one of those, like, I think there are people like this all over the world. My dad had a family to take care of and he had a job. And I think that there was an opportunity at one point for him to chase that dream of being a musician, and he chose his family instead. But what you have is this guy who put on a uniform and went to work every day, who was and still is easily one of the best musicians I've ever met in my entire life. Like just an absurd musician, an absurd vocalist. And it became one of those things that I didn't even realize was a big deal because we would throw house parties that would devolve into like my dad playing guitar and all of us like pulling a truncated Von Trapp family scene with whatever type of music it was that my parents happened to be into at the time. And so I went I went to college because there were two things that I loved doing. I loved writing and still do. And I wanted to see like how far the vocal performance stuff could take me. And the answer is not very far. Like the answer is I I'm a fun karaoke date, but like there were people in there who were going to be opera singers. There were people in there who were going to go on to amazing things. And I very quickly learned that while I was better than average at writing, I enjoyed the music side of it. Like I'll go sing with the a cappella group kind of thing. But that clearly wasn't going to be the direction that I went long term.
Yeah, no, I've met people in my life that are very good singers, and when like I've realized that when people start referring to their voice as an instrument is when it starts to become okay, this person takes singing very seriously. Because I think I can't sing, but like you know a lot of people that can sing fairly well, right? But like they don't think of it as an instrument that requires maintenance and all of that, right? Like you can go to a bar and you can hear a good singer, but most of those people probably don't think of their voice as an instrument. They just, maybe they'll drink some honey tea or something before they start go on stage or
Right.
whatever, right? Um, it is pretty fascinating, like the juxtaposition of writing. Like, I mean, I don't want to say writing music, like our song music, but like there's probably something in there, right? Like having an interest in writing, and then the music side of it, you've probably written plenty of songs or attempted to write plenty of songs, and now you're in this world where you have a different art form that you have learned to master, right? Like using technology as the brush or technology as the instrument or whatever. So like what are some things that you see parallels between kind of the two disciplines?
That that everything involves intentional practice. That you can you can lose both of those talents. You can lose both of those skill sets really quickly if you don't apply them. And it's something that I've learned about the music side as I get older, but it's also something that I've learned about the tech side as I move further away from being hands-on day to day. And um, moving into a management role has made me very happy in some ways, and has also made it so that that there's a disconnect with, like, I don't write code, right? I
Sure.
don't have a home lab anymore. Like, there's some of those things that were kind of staples of my early career just don't really exist anymore. And what you realize is all of that involves muscle memory. Problem
Mm,
solving involves muscle memory, right? All of the things that we do on a daily basis around how we think about things, how we think critically through issues, how we help people navigate different challenges, all of that is, you can be born with the bones of that talent, but practice is the only thing that's going to make it so that it will take you anywhere. And I think that that's been, whether it's writing, which most of my writing is just creative writing. Like,
yeah.
I loved, particularly when I was younger, I loved writing stories. I loved writing plays. I loved writing dialogue. I loved trying to take my speaking voice and translate it into my writing voice.
Sure.
But it's all of it requires an intention to be intentional around the practice that's involved with it.
Yeah, I don't really subscribe to the idea that people can just wake up and do things. Like I'm very
I can't.
yeah. I mean,
I don't, maybe there are
like
people who
there
can.
are
I'm
probably,
not one of
let's
them.
be real, there are probably some people that we know that can wake up and do whatever. Like I had a computer science professor in college that he gave us an assignment. I think it was like on red black trees or something like that. And somebody asked him in class, like, because I think he gave us a week to do the assignment. And somebody asked him, like, oh, like if you were to do it, like how long would it take you? And he's like, as long as it took me to type it. And I'm like, okay, first off, you're so full of it, like that, whatever. But my point is, yeah, there's probably some people out there that they can immediately start doing stuff. I do need, like what you're saying, a warm up. Like it's funny, like I don't this for people that are watching the video, like I have guitars behind me, and like I play guitar sparingly, and I notice that if I don't play for a while, it's really hard. Like there are songs that I can play all the time, and if I don't play for like a week or 2 weeks, hands are a bit slower, the frets don't ring out as well, and I'm just like, man, like this whole like 10,000 hours thing is so damn true. And then like also putting in like the intentional practice, like you're talking about having intention, right? Like
Yeah.
I think that there's a lot of people that they just go through the motions and don't put intention to it, and then they don't understand why they're not excelling, right?
And that's okay. Like, one thing that I've learned as I've gotten older is that my level of ambition and someone else's level of ambition,
Yes.
or my level of dedication and someone else's level of dedication, does not have to be the same.
Yeah.
And it doesn't make
Yeah.
anybody wrong, and it doesn't make anybody better or worse. There are there are people who sometimes I envy the peace that they have,
Mm-hmm.
where they have gotten to a point where they're comfortable and they just chill there. They just stay there. Like, it's been a big change for me since the pandemic, but for sure, like, there are people who have found the happiness that they need, and they don't want to practice anymore. They want to do what they're doing and
Yeah.
continue to do it for as long as it takes care of them, from a career standpoint, and I respect that.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question about imposter syndrome then. Like,
Sure.
so do you like? I'd imagine like all of us, you suffer with it to an extent, but it sounds to me like you kind of made peace with it, which I think is like pretty profound. Like I
Yeah.
struggle with it all the time. Like even though I don't aspire to be other people because I think that is whatever, but I do like I look at some. I'm like, man, it would be so much simpler if I had this particular thing or that particular thing like that this person has.
Yeah. I think I had to. So, um, I went through kind of all of the phases. I was a network engineer. I worked at a local company here in Charlotte, North Carolina, that built data centers,
Hmm.
right? So did managed services in data centers, built out their first multi-tenant VMware environment. From there, moved over onto the vendor side of things, worked for the joint venture between VMware, Cisco, and EMC back in the day, building, converged infrastructure because everybody needs to buy more hardware.
Yep.
Kind of progressed through, worked for a couple startups. One of them got acquired by NetApp. After I finished at NetApp, I moved over to Microsoft, and Microsoft was the first role that I applied for specifically to be a people manager.
Mm. Okay.
And that was a very intentional choice on my part. And I think it's fascinating to watch the context switch that has to happen for people as they move through their career. Um, the context switch that I had to make from having things be about me or about the team to having things be about you beat the imposter syndrome out of me
Interesting.
because I can't be there for you when I am suffering from the same thing that I'm trying to help you
Yeah. Yeah.
work your way through. So to some extent, I got lucky because I had a wonderful management team that helped me through that transition. I had a company and space where I could get myself very deep dipped in the technology before I made that transition so that I didn't feel like I was immediately behind when I started trying to help the people who were doing the work. But I would say that imposter syndrome is probably the number one issue that particularly younger folks in their career that I work with them on trying to overcome.
Mm.
Uh, and I feel like there are certainly days where I wish I could be better and faster and stronger.
Sure.
But there came a point when I realized that I was going to spend the rest of my career caring about the people that worked for me, where like I had to I had to be very intentional that it's not about me. Like I'm only competing with the me from yesterday. I'm
Yeah.
not competing with, nor will it do me any good to compare myself. What is the comparison is the thief of joy?
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
say that, but I felt like when I made that transition into the management side of things that I had to, or I
Mm.
couldn't ever be as good at that job as I wanted to be.
No, I mean, I think it's a lot that's very spot on. I like the thing that you said specifically about like how can I help you with an issue
Yes.
if I am weighted down by that issue. And that's not to say that like we can't give people advice when we're still struggling to the same thing. Like, there are tons of groups out there that exist where people that are going through the work themselves are
Sure.
helping people that are getting into the work, right? But I do think that there is something to say that is like if you're able to see a situation as it really is, like, hey, I'm very,
I've been in that hole.
yeah,
I've been in that hole. I will jump into that hole with you
yeah,
because I know how to get out of that hole.
yeah,
Right? Like, and I feel like the fact that I can say that genuinely and honestly, right? Like I know how that feels. I've done dozens of community talks on imposter syndrome.
yeah,
Like I've done dozens of community talks on the cost of advancement,
mm-hmm,
right? That you keep saying yes to things and sooner or later there's a burden that you must
sure,
carry,
yep,
right? Like I've done those conversations for years and years and years, and I just don't feel like I would be very good for the people that I'm trying to be here for if we were all struggling from the
yeah.
same thing and didn't know how to move past it.
I think also there's something to say, like, as somebody that has had great managers and managers that there's room for improvement, like, if somebody's authentic with me, and, like, I really appreciate management or a mentor or whatever you want to call it that, like, just says it how it is. Like, look, nobody's perfect. These are things that I struggle with. They probably are similar to the things you struggle with. Like, let's figure this out together, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I've had managers that were very hands off. I've had managers that were very hands on. I've had managers that treated me like a friend, and I've had managers that treated me like a kid. Like, I've had, like,
Right.
and
Well, I'll go out on a limb. I'll go out on a limb and I will bet you that some of the worst managers you've ever had were amazing individual
probably,
contributors.
probably. And I want to get into
Because that
that. Yeah.
because that context switch, like we could talk about that for an entire hour.
Oh,
Like
sure. Yeah.
that transition from IC into whatever is next or
Hmm.
not, I think is a fascinating discussion to have.
Oh, sure. To the extent where I've been asked in the past, like, would you manage people? And I said, I don't know. I don't think it's fair, at least with me in my current state of my life, for me to manage people because I don't. Not because I don't think that I wouldn't do a good job, but because I don't think I can give the level of energy that a group of people require out of a
Sure.
manager. So, like, I've specifically said, like, at this point I want to be an IC. Does that mean at some point in time in the
Yeah.
future I might want to be a people manager? Sure. But I don't want to do the thing that a lot of people in management end up doing where they see the management opportunities as the way to get up the ladder.
Yes.
And, like, hey, I know that this is the maximum amount of visibility that I can get as an IC. But, I had a very good friend tell me flat out, like, what's great about being a manager is that you can take all of the work from all of the people that are in your organization and not take credit for it, but use it to step up a little bit.
Yeah.
And that's fine. But I think that there's also something to say about, like, to your point, so you just have to kind of, it's a selfless act managing people.
It is, but I also don't want to take away from the fact that like it is a career progression step.
Sure.
And when people say what I hate most, what hurts my heart the most is people who say, I love being an IC. I'm a good IC. I'm
Hmm.
good for this company in this role, but I have to move to a manager if I want to advance
Hmm.
because now we have lots of problems instead of just one person who wants to advance,
Yeah.
right? So the ability to be able to do that on your part to say I have this opportunity but I don't want it, or even harder, I know people who have been asked to move into a manager role who have done so and then come and said this is not for me.
Well, you
Like
can stall your career out. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, you're right because and that's the other point that I wanted to make was that's not a you problem.
Yeah.
That's a company problem. And what one thing that I've been very happy about is both at Microsoft and at GitHub, I've had the same manager, right? Ashley
Yeah.
Willis,
Sure.
who's just who's wonderful in every way you would possibly want a manager to be wonderful. And one of the things that she has done at both of those organizations is to put in a career progression ladder that does not consolidate into management,
Hmm.
right? And Microsoft has this for, and you know this, Microsoft has this for all roles
Yep.
where you can go all the way up to distinguished engineer as
Yep.
an individual contributor
Yep.
and never have someone reporting to you.
Yep.
And I can't express to you how much I appreciate the ability for both managers and individual contributors to understand what lane they want to stay in.
Hmm.
Because again, I'm willing to bet for most of the people listening, and I know for me, the worst managers I ever had were unbelievably good individual contributors. The managers that I know who struggled the most struggled in large part because when they were challenged, it was very easy for them to going back to being the best of the individual
Yep.
contributors on that team, which was not helping their employees, which was not helping the company. So having that path that says, I want you to be an individual contributor for as long as you want to be an individual contributor. But then also, if you want to move into that management path, we'll provide you the means and support and people to be able to help you do
Yeah.
that. I think that when people out there are looking, and it's 2024, so the job market is an absolute disaster. But in normal times, when people are looking at new roles or people who are looking at companies that they may want to go work for, it's way high on my list of things that I recommend people ask about is how far can I go in the job role,
Yeah.
the job type that I have now.
Yeah. Well, this is what's fascinating to me too, is like, you know, because at least at big companies, I'm not saying that it's like this at every company, but like it is a change in career path, right? Like a lot of people just think like, oh, you could be a manager and then you'll be a manager and then you want to be an IC. No, like you gotta like jump over a stream. And sometimes like if you go over to management and you don't like it, it's not like you can maybe hop over to a tangential job over in the IC side. No, you might have to take a step back.
Yeah.
And like a lot of people struggle with that because I could only imagine I want to be an IC. I want to be a manager. I'm an IC. And I take that risk and I find out it's not for me and then it's like, "Oh, well, shoot, now what do I do?" Like
Yeah.
I'm going to go down a level than I was when I was an IC because I came over as a manager and I burned 18 months, 2 years of
Right.
my career, right?
So you don't. So
Yeah.
you don't. So you just become a bad manager.
Yes. I didn't want to say it specifically, Jeremiah, but you're like,
No, but
yeah, yeah.
but like I mean we've all been there, and I feel like I again got extraordinarily lucky to have the transition that I did, and it's
Hmm.
why it's one of the things that I like to talk about the most is that context switch. And when people come to me and say, "Hey, they've asked me to be a manager, talk me through whether this is a good idea or not," that discussion to me is so critically important. And we just don't, we simply don't have it enough with people as they progress through their
Yeah.
career.
I wanted to swing back around to a little bit of like, to put your IC hat back on a little bit, right?
Sure.
Like, I don't know your background extensively, but like, based on, the limited view of what I've seen you do in over the last few years as somebody who has been introduced to you, like you're very much, you enjoy the networking side of things, right? Like, I think when you're in tech, you kind of fall into two camps, so to speak. You're like, I'm a developer, blah blah blah, and then there's
Yeah.
other people's like, I'm a crusty old IT admin. Like those are the two camps you fall
Yeah.
into, right? But like, there's also this thing in the middle where you can like do really cool stuff on the networking side and do engineering in that. So like,
Yeah.
you want to talk a little bit about like how you're introduced to like that area of tech and why it resonated with you? You think?
Yeah. So, I mean, I came up hardcore infrastructure,
Yeah.
and my my job was always to make infrastructure as boring as it could possibly be,
Sure.
right? Boring infrastructure is not easy.
Mm.
Infrastructure is not unimportant, but the best infrastructure is incredibly boring. And all of the steps that I took in my career, whether it was building data centers for people to outsource,
Yep.
building managed services for people to outsource, working for companies that built converged infrastructure so that you could simplify, working for a storage startup that was all API driven so that you could start to integrate more of the infrastructure into the developer focus. And then finally moving over into Microsoft has been like, I feel like I've followed the point of abstraction
Mm-hmm.
in
Yeah.
my career as I went through. And what I realized was the infrastructure part is never going to go away, and the
Sure.
developers are never going to want to understand it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's ironic. I started out as a network engineer. I loathe networking complexity with every fiber of my being at this point. I was one of those people who had a full home lab
Sure.
in
Yeah.
the house with a half dozen VLANs to segregate traffic, and I still had space and power in a rack over in the data center that I used to work in, and so I was replicating things back and forth, and it was a nightmare
Sure.
once I got married and had kids, because if I'm on the road and the power goes out and all of a sudden DNS doesn't work anymore for the people who are connected to the wireless,
Yeah.
like it was an absolute disaster. So I've kind of ruthlessly simplified all of that stuff.
Sure.
And what it did was also help me understand that simplifying that for the actual people that I work with every day, who are DevOps engineers, who are developers, who are the people who are either writing the code or building the platforms for the people who write the code, that if I need that simplified as I move through life, that parallels exactly what we've been trying to do with infrastructure and bringing it into the DevOps realm, bringing it into the development platform realm, bringing it into how do we make this an API that developers can consume without getting people bogged down in
Yeah.
the weeds. So I got thrust into that because at some point I had a salesperson look at me and go, "Oh, you can talk to people.
Uh-oh.
You
Yeah.
should come with me." And that was the end of my not being customer facing days. And
Yeah.
it's funny because I went to Microsoft with the idea like I don't want to be customer facing. Like I want to
Sure.
go back to
Yeah.
being, and it lasted, 3 months
Sure. Yeah.
before, you do a talk at Build, and all of a sudden somebody says, we're not letting you back into the
Yeah.
room anymore. You're going to stay up here with us.
Yeah. No, it's I learned this very early in, I guess, in my career. I used to work at Geek Squad, like the Best Buy computer repair people. I used to do that job in college, and part of that job is, a lot of people probably don't realize, there's a lot of sales in that job, like kind
Yes.
of a gross amount of sales, like selling, grandma like data backup and stuff. Like, you don't want to lose all your grandkids' pictures, grandma. Like, whatever. And I had a manager tell me, like, quite simply, I can give you a book on any technology or any computer concept, and I'll tell you to read the book and you'll figure it out. I can't teach you how to talk to people. I can't teach you how to sell to people. I can't teach you how to connect with people. And I think that that's something that really resonated with me early on. It's like, okay, like, a lot of things are learned, and there are a few things that are, you just have it or you don't. Like we were talking, like
Yeah.
when we were talking earlier about, like, the people management, or like the wanting to help people. Like, you either have that or you don't, or you can
Yeah.
mask it, right? You can act like you like doing it, but you really can't stand it, right? Um, and I think one of the things that's fascinating to me about, like, this thing you're talking about, oh, you realized, oh, you can talk to people, like, you're not in the back room anymore, like, get out front, dude. Like,
Yeah.
I wonder, is that something that sometimes you miss, the and I don't want to conflate your ego or anything, like the anonymity of being a backroom person. Do you miss it a little bit? Like, being able to just do your thing, even when managing people, doing your thing, and then, people don't really care what Jeremiah is up
Yeah.
to.
I think uh, so much of that public facing is a choice,
Sure.
right? I
Yeah.
mean, you can choose to make your public persona a core part of who
Hmm.
you are or your career, or you can choose not to. And most importantly, I think you can change along the way.
Yeah.
There was clearly a time where I was flying 250,000 miles a year,
Yeah.
and my entire life was spent on stage in front of groups of people and live tweeting keynotes from around the
Sure.
world,
Yeah.
and like writing a blog post every 3 days. And it was real easy to kind of follow along with the adventures of Jeremiah. And when the pandemic started, I made a very conscious choice that I didn't want to do that anymore. It wasn't serving me
Hmm.
anymore. And the impact that I was having was not worth the cost
Sure.
of that
Yeah.
type of focus in your career. And so, like, I have become much more about me instead of much more about work on social media.
Yeah.
You are more likely to find me posting about model trains and politics than you
Sure.
are
Yeah.
about tech at this point.
Yeah.
Um, like it's I don't miss, I nobody can make me share.
Yeah.
And now that my job is much more focused on amplifying and supporting the people who work for me than it is about being self-aggrandizing. Like I don't want or need the spotlight at
Sure.
this point in my career. It makes it really easy. Like yeah, I
Yeah.
don't I don't miss it at all because I was able to reclaim the vast majority of that when I decided that I was going to move into this role.
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty fascinating. I think one of the things too, like, and I think we both struggle from this, is people just in this space in general, is that, like, you got a lot of friends online that you
Especially
only,
advocates.
yeah,
Like that's what we do.
that like you only like there's my wife makes fun of me all the time, my internet friends, right? Like, I'll say like, oh, I get to see so and so, and they're like, who's that? And I'm like, oh, it's an
Right.
internet friend. And like, if I just stopped social media completely, I wouldn't get to talk to some of my friends, which
Yeah.
is a bummer. But so I subscribe to this idea that like, oh, I'm gonna deal with like being on social media, and I'm gonna deal with
Yeah.
that because I want to talk to my friends. And
But there's a flip side to that too, which is when the world crashes
yes,
and all of a sudden all of
gee,
your friends
when would that ever happen? I don't know.
who uh funny story, we were doing the Microsoft Ignite tour. And it was something that the advocacy team at Microsoft, we
Hmm.
created all the content. It was a
Yep.
2-day event. We kind of flew around the world. It's now the AI tour, which
Yep.
is essentially a cut down version of the same thing for the people out there who have seen information about that. We were in the middle of doing a European swing. We'd done Milan, we'd done Copenhagen. I was in London waiting to go to Zurich when I got a text message from Microsoft Travel that I'd never seen before, which was literally, you must be on a plane that returns to the US in the next 12 hours. They're about to shut down Europe.
Mm.
And that was the last time I was on an international flight.
Wow.
What was that? Like April of 2020?
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
my wife and I were at an airport coming home. We were in Las Vegas, and we're looking at the news, and like they're for people that know
yep.
me, they know that I live in Washington State, and like they're talking about like Kirkland, Washington on the
Yeah.
news, and I'm like, we're flying home into like
Yep.
whatever the heck that is, right?
Yeah, and nobody knew anything,
Yeah.
but the like that the choice that I made to be that type of advocate, right? And we
Hmm.
talk internally, we talk about the difference between like an advocate and an evangelist,
Sure.
right? With an evangelist being, I just fly around and spread the good word, and an advocate being more, I understand what your challenges are, and I can help you work through those challenges with the technology that I'm advocating for. And I can advocate on your behalf with a product team to help build you a better product going forward.
Yeah.
Right. And those are two, in my mind, those are two very different roles.
Sure.
And one of those kind of demands a public presence,
Sure.
right? Like I need people to know when I'm speaking and where I'm speaking. The
Yeah.
other
Yeah.
one just demands that I know my customers.
Hmm.
And I'm okay with that trade. Like
Sure.
the idea of all of my friends are at the end of a flight is great until you can't fly.
Yeah.
And then you
Yeah.
quickly realize what's important. And I have lots of friends that I still keep up with. Rarely is it on social media these days.
Yeah. No, it's it's pretty crazy that before before the COVID times, like you know you had thriving ecosystems of conferences all over the world and people flying all over, and this whole like I guess ecosystem of like the DevRel world, right? And then the pandemic happens, and then it's like, okay, now what? So people kind of switched to virtual conferences and doing a lot of more streaming and online content, things like that, which is great. And in some areas of the world, like the conference scene has come back, and in other places it hasn't. So it's like you're trying, and we're in this weird state where it's like, okay, do you put the effort into getting back in person because that's really important, but then you lose like this reach of this virtual audience, right? The quote
Yeah.
unquote virtual audience, right? And it's hard. It's hard for people out there, like
Yeah. I
because
think we had such an opportunity. We had such an opportunity to change how we, particularly at larger companies, to change how we talk to people, and we wasted it.
Mm-mm.
We had the opportunity to reimagine what a conference is, and we let the same, event planners who had been
Sure.
doing conference spaces forever, who didn't understand why the most popular part of that conference was the hallway track that they had absolutely no idea
Sure.
how
Yeah.
to build or foster, ended up then trying to translate it directly into the virtual. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I feel like both from someone who was presenting at conferences where it was miserable doing it online, as well as people who were attending conferences. Um, like we lost an opportunity there that I think would have benefited everyone,
Oh yeah.
because we had the same people trying to do the same thing, just in an entirely different medium.
Well, I mean, and even to the effect that, like, I remember having conversation with people, and then people saying it wouldn't work, and I would say, well, how do Twitch streamers be successful then? Because that community is completely hallway track, right? Like,
Yes.
you'll be watching somebody stream, and you're not even really watching the stream. You're chatting, and you're
You're just
chatting with
watching the
people.
chat.
Yeah, right.
Yep.
And there's something to be made about, like, people just wanting connection with the in the way they want to be most comfortable, right? If you want to be anonymous in a chat, like, cool. If you want to
Yeah.
be the person that's on the camera doing the thing, like, that's cool too. But, like, we're not in 2019 anymore.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of people wish that we were back in 2019, but that's not really a thing. So
No.
it becomes extremely challenging.
And it'll the at the end of the day, people have things they want to sell to people who want to buy them,
Of
and we
course.
will find the equilibrium. I think that we can't go back to 2019, and we utterly failed at 2021. And so there's going to be some type of conference plus that emerges out of this, that is not just, oh, we're live streaming all the sessions,
Yeah.
because I've always been able to go to YouTube and get the sessions. But is more than just, oh, you can chat. Like, there's a Pubble chat for you to be able to ask
Yeah.
questions in the session. Like, there's a there's an enhanced experience that I've seen a couple
Yeah.
companies kind of dip their toe into. We'll get there,
Yeah.
but right now I think there's just a happiness that people can get on a plane and actually go to a conference,
Yeah.
or at least they feel like that's something that is safe for them now that it wasn't before. But we'll figure it out. I'm happy to do my 2 or 3 conferences a year
Sure.
instead of the 12 or 13
Yeah. Yeah.
that I was doing in the before times. And I think that I mean, clearly when you look at the revenue numbers for all of these companies that were doing these gigantic conferences, they're doing just fine.
Yeah, no, I think we all can agree that all these companies are doing just fine. Um, I think we wouldn't be doing ourselves we'd be doing ourselves a disservice by not talking a little bit about the stuff that you're doing these days, right?
Sure.
Like, for a little bit of background, like, you used to work at Microsoft, and now you're at GitHub in this DevRel space. And I'd love to kind of, as we wrap up, I'd love to talk, like, a little bit about, you obviously have a passion for people management and helping people get to that next step in their career. And, I think we live in this world, especially like in the DevRel sector, where people can be very autonomous, right?
Yes.
Like, if especially if the thing is, like we said, it's getting on planes, it's creating content, it's doing a little bit of inbound work, so working with customers and reporting that back out to product teams. And I've heard some people say that it's like, really, like, DevRel people don't need to be managed. And I'd love to get your thoughts on how to best, and I know it's not the same for everybody, right? Like, just put that
Sure.
disclaimer on there. But I'd love to, like, how is successful management in DevRel look? Because I'll say this, like, a lot of companies have gotten it wrong.
Yeah.
Like, and I think that, for what it's worth, I think GitHub and, the team that has put together, like, an ecosystem of, like, everybody who works there is great. The
Yeah.
content is always good. People are moving around, but they're not on a plane 15 times a year, like you're saying. And they're just generally nice people to be around. So obviously that means something.
So I would say I always start with the premise that I'm going to treat everybody fairly,
Hmm.
but not equally.
Okay.
Um, your statement that it's not going to be the same for everyone, I would go one step further and say it is not the same for anyone.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody that works for me is at a different point of their career, is at a like has a different skill set, has a different level of ambition and where they want to go. And my job is to set a framework that everybody can work within and understand what the company needs from them. The basic blocking and tackling. Here's how we report issues. Here's how we track work. Here's how we communicate. Here are the meetings that we're going to be in. Here's the, kind of setting the framework for the culture of the team as a subset of the culture of the company.
Mm.
And then I need to know who you are,
Yeah.
because because I don't need to manage you in how to edit a video. I don't need
Sure.
to manage you in how to speak on stage. But if I know that you are self-conscious about your stage presence, then I can help you with that in
Mm-hmm.
order to be able to get you to whatever it is that you want to do next. If I know you want to get promoted, and we know that promotion is a game we have to play,
Yes.
and it's about stakeholders and it's about feedback and it's about how do we make it so that everybody's in alignment, and how do we demonstrate, and how do we provide evidence for, and how do we show impact, and all of these things. If that's what you want to do, then I can help manage you through that process. If you want to move from an individual contributor role to another individual contributor role or to a management role, like, I try to save the management for the things that are unique to you as an individual with where you are in your career right now, rather than I need you to fill out a TPS report. Right.
Yeah.
Because,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's one of, genuinely, it's one of the things that I appreciate most about my job, is that the people that work for me are incredibly senior. These are not folks who are working at their first job.
Yeah.
These are not folks who are trying to figure out where they want to go with this. These are folks who, if left alone, would still do good work. My job is to make it so that everybody's rowing in the same direction. You can have your own sparkly oar. You can have a special seat on the boat, but ultimately someone tells me what direction we're rowing, and it's my job to make sure that we're all rowing. I can't promise you we're going to row in the same direction tomorrow, but I promise you, we will all be rowing in the same direction. And then save the big work for: who are you? Where do you want to go? How do you want to get there? What what insight do I have, having been through that before? But then also, what guidance can I give you, knowing how this job works and how this company works? Um, I I can't be a micro at this level. I can't be a micromanager of people. There have been
Yeah.
times where we hired people literally straight out of college, and you have to be a very different manager for people who are having their first jobs, or for people who are doing this for the first time, right? And then we talk about the things that I can't teach you. I can't teach you to show up on time.
Yeah.
I can't
Yeah.
teach you to give a shit.
This
Like,
is
I
true.
can't.
Yeah.
And when you're very early in your career, knowing what those things are and leaning into them is important. When you are senior in your career, like the folks who work for me, they don't need to be reminded of that stuff. What they need is help overcoming obstacles. They need help breaking big tasks into little tasks. They need help giving them visibility within the org for the work that they're doing. They need help with where it is that they want to go in their career. And so those are the things that I feel like are my responsibility to help with as a manager.
Mm-hmm.
And every single person on the team is different. And that's my job, to understand that and what fair is to them.
Yeah. I mean, that sounds great. I think one of the things
It's
that
a lot of work.
yes,
It's a
yeah.
lot of work, my
I,
dude.
I, I
Like,
like how you just throw it out there like it's just so second
right.
nature, right? And I appreciate the fact that I know that it's not. But like it's just so funny when somebody can eloquently say it in a way that's like, "Oh yeah, sure, yeah." Like my response is like, "Yeah, yep, that sounds great." Cuz like
Yes.
you make
But
it seem
finding
like
some
yeah.
finding it's hard to do. I've not always done it well.
Sure.
I've certainly learned as I've went. I owe a debt of gratitude to everyone who has worked for me or everyone that I have worked for since I started at Microsoft after I left NetApp once it acquired the startup that I worked for. I genuinely like I could go through the entire list of people and kind of what each of them have taught me that have gotten me here.
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard to find a manager who is interested in doing that work
Sure. Yeah.
and capable of doing that work. And so building like making happy employees is great, but really being there to mentor people who are moving into the management side for the first time or people who are struggling with the management side at a new company. Like I moved from Microsoft to AWS
Mm-hmm.
as a people manager for 2.5 years, and those couldn't be two different environments
Sure. Yeah.
to manage people in. And so learning the culture and learning the people and learning how to do that, like you again, it's just like everything else. You have to practice at it. You have to have exposure to it. You have to be intentional about wanting to learn from it. I've been extraordinarily lucky in the opportunities that I've been given and the support that I've been given. So again, it's just one of those things that helping new managers who are working through that part of things, particularly in tech, is just really rewarding.
Yeah, and I think it shines through, right? Like I'm not again not trying to
I
conflate the
hope
ego,
so.
but like you know, I know the people that are on your team, and like I'm consistently impressed just by the content they put out, the quality of their
Yeah.
character, and everything. And like, and not to say that like you're responsible for all of it, but you do have some
No.
influence, right? And I
Um,
think that
I
that
I
yeah,
help make sure we're rowing in the right direction. Like
sure,
they are singularly impressive
yeah,
people at all of the work that they do. That we get the right content out in the right place, pointed at the right audience,
mm-hmm.
is something that I will at least take partial credit for. But I'm man, we've been, especially having just gone through Universe and then gone through Microsoft Ignite, I am constantly blown away with
Yeah,
just the creativity of the ways that they try to relate GitHub and the product to the people who need it and the people who are using it. Um, and there's so much more to come. Like it is genuinely fun every day to watch the content that these folks create.
yeah.
And I'm happy to lend as much megaphone to it or make sure that it gets put into the right channel so that it gets seen by as many people as possible.
I think that's great. I think, it really resonates with me, like when somebody takes pride in seeing the work of other people. Like, I think that I think we live in a world, this is a bit mini of a rant, but like, I think that, like, in general, I'm very guilty of it at some points. Like, people are very selfish.
Yeah.
And, when you come across people that, not to say that you're not selfish at times, you probably are, but like, when you see somebody who is making an effort to be selfless in making sure that, like you said, the megaphone thing, just amplifying as much as you can, removing those barriers that people that don't want to deal with them definitely don't want to deal with them. So kind of taking
Yep.
that first line of fire or whatever you want to say, whatever cliche you want to use. So it's endearing hearing something like that.
Well,
Uh,
I appreciate it.
yeah.
And my mother told me to never turn down a good
Oh,
compliment.
sure,
However,
sure.
that's literally what they pay me for.
Yeah, yeah.
Like it is this it's funny because I share this with all of the people that I work for. There's an amazing scene in the TV show Mad Men
Mm-hmm.
where Peggy, who works for Don Draper, is quitting because
Yep.
she's angry. She built a campaign. The campaign won all of these awards. She didn't get any credit. She hasn't gotten any feedback. She's you borderline in tears, asking like why, like you never even said thank you. And he just kind of incredulously looks at her and says, "That's what the money's for." Right? Like
Yeah.
that's the part I get to be selfish about. Like I
Yeah.
I I have I have a life to take care of. I have people to take care of. I have kids to take care of. Like I have community like I have social issues that I care very deeply
Yeah.
about that I want to be able to take care of. Like that's where I get to be selfish. I don't get to be selfish as a manager. I explicitly signed up that I will at best be illuminated in the glow of the work that you do
Yeah.
and not in taking credit for any of that. My
This
job is to make my boss successful and to facilitate the people who work for me. And if I do those things, that's what the money's for. And then I can go live the rest of my life. Like, I don't want to take too much credit for being this selfless
well,
paragon
it's
of management.
I
Like,
think you might be the first
it's
person in the history of humanity that has been able to seamlessly basically give positive credit to Don Draper's management style, right? Like it's I mean, if anybody's watched
or
Mad
at
Men,
least he's telling the truth, right?
yes. Yes.
Like
The
and
authenticity is important.
for some people, that is exactly what they want,
Yeah.
right? My level, my comp, like those are the things that drive me. Those are the things that inspire me. And for some people, it is absolutely not. And the it is the impact that they're having. It is the work that they're doing. It is the people that they get to work with. And both of those are extraordinarily valid reasons to wake up and go to work in the morning.
Yeah.
It's my job to know which of them are you so that when we talk through our day and when we figure out what you're going to do next, I can respect what it is that you came to work today for. As long as the customers are happy and as long as we're having the impact that the company wants us for, you can be motivated by
Yeah.
anything that gets you to show up and be your best self and do your best work every day.
Yeah, now you got me thinking about Mad Men though, so I have to watch that show again. Maybe not
I
the last
highly
season.
recommend it.
Maybe not the last season, but the first couple of seasons are really solid.
I don't know. A retreat to California sounds good some days.
That's true. That's true. This conversation has been great. It's been one like I feel like we didn't really talk about tech a lot, which I think is which is great because because it's
Mission
well, it's
accomplished.
one of those things where it's like you talk about tech during your day job, right? So, and it's one of those things where getting the opportunity to talk about the things you find interesting, and in this space, like there's all of this soft skills, squishy skills, people skills, whatever you want to call them, that people just kind of wave their hand at. And when you have conversations with people that take a lot of pride in that side of the work,
Yeah.
it's refreshing. And I
Yeah.
love to end our conversation like we've been talking about a handful of topics over the last hour, and I'd love to kind of get your summarization or the things that you feel like if heaven forbid you listen to this and other than hearing my horrible voice, you're like, oh, like this is what I took away from that, and I think that we did a good job. Like, what are some of the things that you think that would be good takeaways for this?
Be intentional.
Sure.
Um, Understand your motivations and your boundaries and be ruthless about them. And recognize that wherever it is that we've gotten, there have been people that have helped us,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't get to be an asshole about it.
Yeah.
You don't get to not pay that forward in whatever way makes the most sense for you or is centered in your experience or the things that you're comfortable with. There are especially in 2024, there are so many people who just need an opportunity.
Yeah.
There's so many people who just need to be given a chance, who just need to be given a hand up. And particularly, I recognize that I am very privileged in being able to do that. You and I have talked about, roles that I have open at work and kind of the process that we go through about finding the right people for that. And I am very aware of my responsibility in that. So be intentional, understand your motivations and boundaries, and be ruthless about them, and like be as good a human as you can be.
Yeah.
And I promise things will work out. Like karma will do what it's supposed to.
Yeah.
Like the effort that you put in, the practice that you put in will do what it's supposed to. And those are just, if you have to boil it down, like not just tech, not just advocacy, not just, GitHub. If you can do those three things every day with with a clear focus on competing with yourself to be better than you were, genuinely, I don't think there's anything you can't accomplish.
All right, I'm ready to run through a wall. Let's go. Let's go.
Good. That's what I'm
No,
here for, man.
no, that's great. And so for folks that you're not already aware of the work that Jeremiah and his team are doing, a great place to find him is on Blue Sky. So you can follow him at jeremiah.net. So JERAMIAH.net. There'll be some links in the show notes to some other places you can find him. And this has been a great conversation, and I'd love to give you the opportunity to leave us with some parting words if you have some.
Um, I I love tech. I love everything that we've talked about. We could do an entire second hour of this just on hobbies. I'm a huge fan
We
of
didn't even do the model train stuff. We didn't.
we didn't talk about trains, we didn't talk about Lego. But it is also it's one of those things that especially in 2024, if I could ask something of your audience,
Hmm.
it's it's find the things that you love that are adjacent to what you do
Yep.
and really lean into them, right? Like the model trains I love because I mean my grandfather started them, but also like we've got people and we can put this in the show notes. We've got people building GitHub repos that are throwing Python wrappers around 30-year-old tech so
Yeah.
that I can run model trains from an API.
Yeah.
Like like
That's so cool.
find your passion, don't burn yourself out on it. Throw it into hobbies as you see fit. But really like take care of yourself because these days it is more important than ever that we figure out how to be other and how to be good to ourselves.
That was great. And thank you so much again, Jeremiah, for your time. And thank you for the folks that were tuning in live. Thank you for your time as well. And the folks listening into the future, thank you as well. So my name is
Yeah,
Isaac
this was
Levin.
awesome.
Yeah, this has been Coffee and Open Source. And for my friend Jeremiah, this has been Coffee and Open Source. I just said that twice. Oh well. Enjoy the rest of your day.